Welcome everyone. It's episode 14 of the Telemedia News in 10. Can you believe it? It's 14 episodes and we've now finally, Paul, got sick of each other and we decided to bring a chum along with us. So I would like to welcome our first ever guest panelist on our Toddcast, the wonderful Julia DiMambro, who's the founder, CEO of the content licensing agency, Seriously Fresh Media. We don't need to go on too much about that company because you're an exhibitor at Telemedia 8.1, so anyone can go into the 8.1 platform, click on the page, find Seriously Fresh Media. There's a fantastic presentation there, and then you can click straight through to Julia's profile and you can harass her via email if you've got anything that you'd like to follow up with anything to do with premium content. She is the undisputed queen of premium video content, and that's why we've got her on board, because there's going to be quite a few features that will definitely appeal to Jules and her experience. So we look forward to getting a few views from her. She's also put together a series, in fact, of sessions for the Telemedia 8.1 platform, which she's going to tell us a little bit more about later on. So coming up, we're going to cover the 4 top stories that we felt were of most interest. We're also going to be having a quick review of the recent compliance report, which was put together by Empello, which is excellent and extremely clear and very simple to understand, even for the likes of me. We've also got a discussion about content consumption, which is brought to us by Jules, based on a Forbes article. Who knew, Paul, that Forbes would be writing about our world? And then finally, we're just going to, as I say, go through a couple of session highlights that Jules has been involved with. So hi, Jules, welcome.
Hey, hello, guys, can I just say what an absolute privilege it is to be talking with you guys and to be the first guest. I do feel quite honoured. I even curled my hair.
Well, as did I. The first story we picked out was Cloud Gaming gets a mobile turbocharge in landmark international partnership. Those guys from PM Connect came up with this one again. Can't keep them out of the news. Millions of gaming fans are set to play Fortnite, Rocket League and Grand Theft Auto on mobile for the first time due to a groundbreaking partnership between these two cloud gaming providers, Remote My App and mobile content and payment specialist PM Connect. The cloud gaming market is set to be worth 5.3 billion by 2023, more big numbers. But the main point about this, I think, is the message is loud and clear. Big opportunities for mobile network operators, and that's got to be good news.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Julia, what do you think?
No, please. No, that's what sort of, well, basically it turns out that my brother from another mother, David Jarvis, was one of the guys that brokered the deal. So the big news here is that they were the first company to actually create this kind of frictionless mobile web front and integrated DCB that allows real kind of heavy, big interactive immersive games to be played over mobile. So it's totally frictionless in terms of there's no app to download, you don't need to use any credit cards. And as you were saying, Jarv, the benefit for the carriers is it really allows them to promote the strength of their network in the bandwidth, in terms of now you can play these real sort of, big, heavy, big name titles, real high class graphics, without sort of downloading applications or going to the Play Store. You can do it all directly. It's just billed to your mobile bill and off you go. So, and they're saying that it could bring something like a 1,500% larger scope of browsers, which ties in really well with some of the points I think we're going to talk about later in terms of the shift of entertainment services during and after the pandemic. So yeah, this is kind of quite major news, and credit to PM Connect, I think.
And good old David Jarvis. Yeah. Paul, I mean, this also plays into the hands of the MNOs with 5G being rolled out, because I guess this is
absolutely
the first chance to see, as Jules said, heavy duty games being able to be streamed and worth money on to the users, right?
But that's what I thought was interesting about this story, is it's about games in this instance, but really that's a precursor to how we're going to see everything being delivered. I think it's interesting because it could well be the end of apps as we know them, perhaps. Ooh, who knows? Perhaps. Discuss. A bit further down the line, I think, as you say, 5G makes this possibly even more compelling. I mean, the things you can do over 5G once it's ubiquitous is going to be pretty intense. I just think it just changes in a way the way things can be delivered, and that's possibly good news for network operators who have increasingly become, dare I say, dumb pipes for other people's stuff, particularly like OTT messaging and so on. This could wrest back some control for them if you can just go for it without the without sort of apps and the like, and make that gaming interactive. I think the COVID sort of pandemic has made consumers think more about how they use mobile, what they're going to do with it, what they want from it, and they want a much better experience. I think the timing of this deal around the sort of rollout of 5G and where we find ourselves globally locked down, this is one to watch. I think this is possibly how content delivery will be sort of changed in the coming months and years.
This is interesting because the first panel that I did had Anthony from Phonics on, and one of the things that he was talking about was there's some great brands out there, but one of the problems that they've had is finding or being able to sort of integrate direct carrier billing in a sort of seamless, really useful way, and getting people to adopt that whilst interacting with these brands. So like you say, Paul, this could really sort of be a bit of a game changer.
Absolutely. I mean, it does throw up the problem that I've had discussed with various people over the years about wanting to add carrier billing, but it's actually quite difficult if you want to do it internationally. You've got to work so many different operators and aggregators and so on to actually get that solution in place. I'm hoping that that's sort of changing now with some of the sort of merger acquisition behavior that's going on in telemedia. But I think, like you say, this sort of model around content delivery starts to make that easier to do as it's more operator centric.
And more sense because you're cutting out, certain aspects of the process that create barriers to conversion, basically.
Totally. And I think that's what we're going to see so much more of, because there's so many people now picking up their phone, wanting to be entertained or to do their shopping or whatever, and they want it to be seamless and easy. They don't mind paying, but they want that to be easy and transparent and quick.
I mean, on that note, let's move on to what it is they are going to be paid for, because I think, one of the trends that we're seeing certainly throughout 2020, and again, something that Jules will no doubt pick up on later, is that, the sheer scale and scope of content that people are now downloading as a matter of course on their phones, the premium content, the value-added services that, telemedia merchants are now taking to market, has expanded hugely. And, who'd have thought 10 years ago that we'd have been getting excited about health and fitness apps? But that's the second story. Global consumer spend on
especially with this kind of body.
Exactly. Oh, Paul, is that? If I discuss it,
he's at least 25% of that 50%.
Exactly. So the consumer spend rose by 50% in 2020. Global consumer spend on health and fitness apps is going great guns across Europe. And I hate to say it, and I don't feel I'm slightly ashamed actually, because I know, in the wake of the vaccination news this week, there are a couple of stories where the UK comes out top, and that is simply a coincidence. But and unlike almost any other European competition, we came top. The Germans came second with $89.3 million, and France was a very disappointing third with $56.4 million. And I suppose this also links with the second story, which also reinforces that point that 2020 was a landmark year for wellness. And again, this kind of dives a little bit deeper. This is from an App Annie report, which can also be downloaded from telemediaonline.com, which talks about consumer spend and app downloads all up by 30%. 71,000 health and fitness apps were released globally. Mental wellbeing also significantly up. So those two stories fit together. They certainly emphasize the fact that the breadth of content and services, value-added services, is expanding constantly. And I just thought, probably we've got Jules here. This is an area that you've probably seen, you're at the coalface, and it's something you've noticed, throughout.
Huge increase in inquiries for this type of content. And of course, it just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because no gyms are open. I know you guys were allowed to leave your house for 30 minutes or whatever it was a day, but in Spain, we were totally locked in for, I think, about a month and a half. And the only way that you could leave the house was if you walked a dog. But the other thing, in Spanish culture, of course, is, a lot more people live in apartments and things like that. So they didn't even have their own land. So you were literally shut in a sort of 2-bedroom apartment. And I think, that's why we've seen such a huge increase. All of this was kind of playing into a perfect storm to create a huge huge demand for this type of content. So one of the things that we notice, of course, it's already a very crowded space. So there's so much content out there. There are so many applications, and there's a ton of free stuff online and on YouTube. And I think one of the best examples of this, I don't know if you guys have heard of Yoga with Adrian. Right, she's lovely. She's from Austin, Texas, and I've used her for a couple of years actually, because she's so kind of like just nice to have voice-wise in your room whilst you're doing your yoga. But she is like one of the biggest stars that's come out of COVID. So I actually heard Greg Davis on UK TV talking about it, saying that he'd done it in the first lockdown. And then Sue Perkins on The Last Leg a couple of weeks ago is kind of all talking about her. So these people have kind of like just really come into their own as a result of the COVID message. So I think, the message is always the same. Is, you should be building services that fall in line with how user trends are developing or evolving or changing, rather than creating a product and then trying to find a way to get people to come to that. Now, obviously, that dynamic has changed with COVID-19 in that we're all at home, we maybe have limited space, we won't have enough for a yoga mat. So it's kind of, how do you then build services that A, compete with all the other noise out there, and B, adapt to or geared towards, say, for me, for example, actually first lockdown, I was rubbish. I was like, just doing the usual drinking, watching too much Netflix and all of that. And it's kind of like, I know I should be being better, but I can't be bothered. And so how do you kind of like appeal to those people and target that new kind of demographic behavior? So the other thing I think to mention with the health and wellness is, of course, where COVID has become so seriously politicized, I think that's kind of rolled over a little bit into health and wellness. So, as Jarv, in the first lockdown, I decided to launch a health and wellness business, which was a dietary supplement that we'd been using for a while, and thought, well, here's a perfect time to get it to the market. Look how fresh-faced he's looking. Yeah. One of my lovely customers. And, but it all falls into that. So it's exactly the same as this whole mask wearing thing in terms of, I believe in evidence-based nutrition, right? What the science can actually demonstrate. But then there's a whole group of people that believe in something totally different, these alternative facts in terms of what is good for you, how you should be exercising, what you should be eating. And it's exactly the same polarized issues that we have with, mask wearing and COVID-19. So I think whilst there's this huge opportunity, and obviously expanded opportunity that's going to be here for a good few years to come, I think if you want to get into this space and monetize this space, I think it's looking at what is your target audience in terms of what group of those health and wellness people do you want to target, and then trying to come up with something that adapts to these new behavioral patterns and these new aspirations as well. I think our objectives, our desires, our fears, how we think about our immune systems, disease, health, all of that has changed. So I think the winners here are going to be the ones that sort of take those elements in terms of where we sit today and kind of put that into innovative service idea. Just kind of like doing yoga classes online isn't going to work anymore, because you're not going to compete with those guys that have been building up their communities for 4, 5, 6 years. I think the other thing with health and wellness, and then I'll shut up, is that it's very, very community based. So you can't just build a service or an application and launch that. You have to build this whole kind of community brand trust, expert trust with your customer base around that as well. So it's much more than just a single product. You have to really sort of know your social media and how to build a brand on social.
Sure. That's, yeah. Well, I tell you what, we have a session right there, Jules. Thank you very much. So obviously, health and wellness, and it's definitely a sector that is now. We weren't talking about it 5 years ago. Now it really is. It's top, and I think if
what's more important these days?
Exactly. And if you look at some of the reports, also the other nice thing about it is those services are kind of more tending towards they tend to be more compliant. So there's hassle. The M&Os like it. So, Paul, what do you reckon? You must be seeing a lot more of this kind of stuff in the news, and goes along like the lines of your prediction about education. Again, something we never thought we'd see before. So, the content landscape changing dramatically, isn't it, mate?
It is, yeah. I don't know, education and wellness, and particularly sort of the where they both meet in this kind of brain training, brain wellness thing.
Self-improvement, I think, isn't it? It's
that sort of was hit my radar back in about 2016, 2017, when a phonics do, where someone started talking about this being an ideal snackable bit of content that would be great for carrier billing. And so, I've sort of had an eye on it for a while, but nothing much happened. And then, of course, because of the pandemic and our obsession with having to be well, it's really taken off. And I think we're going to see more of that. And so, yes, that education, betterment, all those sorts of things are all there. Whereas perhaps maybe mobility and travel and transport and stuff is possibly not as high on the sort of agenda currently. But again, I think we should dust off that initial idea of doing our own yoga video, Jarv.
Yeah, I think you're right, mate. I think you're right. We'll have a meeting about that on Saturday.
I think we should.
Well, let's move on. But if anyone is, I think one of the most interesting things to come out of that little piece was Jules's idea about selling your dog on a subscription basis. That is absolutely brilliant. And I'd be right.
Oh yeah, what in terms of Adrian's yoga dog?
Yeah, if you need to get your dog out, then just give it to people.
Okay, sorry.
I'm going to rent the dog out. This is a brilliant idea.
Snackable dog walking. Right, let's move on. Okay. So, again, I hate to say it, but the UK comes out top in the world rankings for DCB, VAS compliance, and new study shows. Now, I must admit, as I said earlier on, this Empello report is superb. It not only does it is it not 50 pages long? It speaks very plain language. It gives absolutely the kind of information, the stats that you need. Jeremy Flynn, I think, is going to be doing a presentation on this, which we're going to put into the Telemedia 8.1 conference within the next couple of weeks. I would assume, and I've got to talk to them about that we come out top because we've got a pretty hairy and robust regulatory environment. But Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and Egypt, I'm afraid, are falling very, very, very short on that league table. What was really interesting about this, and as I say, I'm going to stop talking and just listen to what you guys got to say. But what I loved about it was there was an acronym alert in there, OTP flows, one-time password, but at least they tell you what their acronyms mean. So well done for that. They talk about what is content blocking. They talk about what misleading flows are. They talk about what brand passing off is, what incorrect opt-ins are, and in-app malware and auto subscriptions. And I think, we've talked about this before, Paul, a lot of this kind of stuff is just sort of bandied around and people just go, oh, yeah, I really know what that's all about. There's some really fantastic, clear descriptions about what it is, how it works. And I think that, the underlying message is, we always know that the fraudsters tend to be one step ahead of the industry. But the good news is that some of the technology that Empello have got here to identify this stuff and cut it out is brilliant. I think as an industry, we've seen numerous businesses, including MCP, Optics, Vina, there's plenty of them out there now that are doing a really great job of tackling this. And I think in general, the industry takes this very seriously. If they don't, they're not their rogue players. And so I would urge everyone to download this report. And I think that I will stop talking and just listen to what you guys have got to say on it. What were the bits that you kind of picked out, Paul?
Yeah, I think it shows two things really, this report, particularly the fact that the UK has come out so well in terms of compliance, is that one, people do take it much more seriously now, I think, and want to be compliant. And I think that they realise that this is actually a really legitimate and lucrative business area that needs to be run properly. I think equally we're seeing more people using these services. It's a more mainstream form of entertainment and engagement, like we were talking just now about wellness apps and things. They're tapping into a whole different load of people. So of course they have to be compliant. People aren't gonna, play along. Gone are the days of these things being a bit sort of, the kind of things you might not sort of admit to using. So people could get away with not really following the rules. It's now very much you can't sort of scam people. I think also, like you say, this report does paint out really clearly what all these things mean and what you have to do to be compliant. And I think that's been missing from the industry all along.
It's sort of implied, isn't it? But actually, it's really refreshing to see it on.
I imagine there's a lot of people reading it going, that's what that means.
Yeah.
I better.
That's why I got the fine.
This is why I keep getting fined. Yeah, quite.
Yeah.
So, but I think there might be an element of that in there that possibly not that simplistically, but it's hard to maybe make sure you've ticked all the boxes and you get caught out. Yeah. But as I say, I think we're going to see so many more mainstream services around, or everything from sort of entertainment services, gaming, fitness, wellness, all those sorts of things. All the content services, they're now sort of a mainstream part of people's lives. So the ones that will be successful will be the ones that do it right. So compliance should just keep going up.
Yeah.
Even in Egypt, hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. Jules, what do you reckon?
Well, so obviously we don't have to deal that much with compliance because we are providing the content to people who have to go through this procedure. But one of the things that I noticed from our side is that a lot of them have to provide, depending on the territory, provide kind of full demos of what the service is going to look like, so it can all be tested by the operators before it goes live and all of that. So I wonder if there is a consequence of, you know, we're all getting so compliant, but is that hindering business in any way? In that, you know, the investment that a lot of these service providers have to undertake to build a whole service, get it populated with a certain amount of content, get it approved by the operator, and then launch it. So all of that money goes into the service before they make their first penny of return. So, you know, whilst the compliance side of things is improving, and which is obviously a great thing for everybody, you know, what's the payoff for that? And is there a better way to kind of find a middle ground where you are kind of championing these kind of, especially sort of new, innovative services, fresh services that are good and you want to go live? How do you make that process less frictional or less problematic? And the other thing I wondered was, you know, with the economic crisis and hardships that we're starting to go into and going to go into much deeper, I think, in the next couple of years, I wonder if that will reverse some of these great statistics in terms of there are going to be more people that are kind of maybe dabbling with more scammy activities to make a quick buck because everybody's going to be shorter of cash or, you know, not meeting targets or whatever.
Yeah.
So those were kind of like the two considerations I have. And obviously, you know, South Africa didn't come out very well on that. And the interesting thing is that, you know, they've been difficult. It's been a challenging territory since sort of day one, even sort of back in the noughties, because they would basically see things going wrong. They would then clamp down. They would really sort of clamp down on the double verification and the billing flow and all of that. And then it would sort of kill the industry for a couple of months or about 6 months or whatever. A lot of people would leave and then they'd sort of build up again. And in the time that I've been in the industry, that's happened about sort of 3 or 4 times. So there's something that they're not getting quite right, that they're still coming out low on that compliance score, but yet they seem to kind of do these radical kind of, right, throw the baby out with the bathwater and let's start again kind of thing.
Yeah. Although, you know, in the future, if we start to see content and value-added services expanding into new areas, and they seem to be the ones that consumers want, you know, maybe people will be more inclined to be pushing those services out and less inclined to do things like sweepstakes, which I noticed came in as being the least compliant, which I guess is, you know, no surprise.
Not surprising, yeah.
You know, it tends to be the sort of the bottom feeding side of the industry, as it turns out. I mean, one of the other things I thought was interesting about this, the conclusion, and it kind of made the point that the media landscape is changing, and the way that people are getting to market is really changing, and that in itself is going to create some serious obstacles and open up services to being fraudulent or for, you know, rogue players to come into the market. And their conclusion was, as many digital publishers look to move away from advertising in favor of subscriptions, and we talked about that last week, VAS providers will have to advertise their services elsewhere. We expect to see growth in social media advertising via affiliates, which interestingly, you then talked about wellness being part of social groups. So, you know, that sort of falls in line. So social media is definitely going to become even more important than it is, and that comes with its own set of problems. And then they make the point, which will then need to be monitored very carefully. Managing the risk of consumers will require greater transparency between merchants, aggregators, and mobile operators. And I don't think that sentence has needed to change for the last 10 years, which is frustrating. But there you go. So and I guess from my point of view, you know, forums like this, forums like Telemedia 8.1, World Telemedia, you know, and our media sources, you know, do our very best to try to bring those various elements of the value chain together and exchange information, and you know, organizations like MEF and AIM, of course, have continued to fight the good fight. So, you know, I think as particularly the mobile operator side, with services that are coming to market, which do give them great opportunities, and we've talked about them in previous stories that we've covered. You know, I think if the mobile operators do start to engage more, then that transparency will sort of be a natural byproduct. And so, you know, all things being equal, I think we've got plenty of reasons to be quite optimistic about 2021. And so with that,
much more than other industries, that's for sure.
Absolutely,
yeah, totally.
And so, you know, if we think about it, it comes down to content, it comes down to understanding your customers, it comes down to identifying and providing a good quality service, seamless billing. We'll move on to a feature that you picked out. Now, even though it's an old one, and we're not against going into the archives. As I said earlier, you know, it's really
October. I mean, not ancient either. You know, we still had computers back then.
That's true, and in fairness, in this industry, we write off November and December anyway. So it's basically happened.
We all want to forget 2020, so that might play in.
Yeah. So this article in Forbes that you picked out, Jules, was really talking, drilling a bit deeper into digital video consumption, and it was interesting to read someone from outside the industry talking about how that has changed over the last year, particularly. And of course, this links in very nicely with some of the sessions that you've done with us over the last couple of weeks. So why don't you give us some salient points from this particular article, and then Paul can throw in his.
Rip those to shreds.
You can rip it to shreds, yeah.
No, not at all. Good article.
Yeah, no, and the reason that I picked it out was it was something that kind of was the main theme across the two panels that we've done so far. And the reason that, you know, when I spoke to Jarvis originally about doing the panels, it was trying to look for something positive amongst all of this horrible crap that had happened in 2020. And you know, what can we take away that we can actually make something positive out of? And obviously, you know, in our telemedia industry, we are, you know, literally blessed in that we've actually seen, you know, we're in a growth pattern here in terms of digital consumption and digital entertainment consumption. And the biggest thing out of that is that how our behaviours have changed over the last 12 months to tie in with the restrictions that have been forced upon us. And the fact that, and I mentioned this in the two panels, and this is the last time I'll repeat it, I'm definitely getting old, I do repeat myself, is that they say that it takes 66 days to create a new habit, right? So, and the reason that I know that is that every January I, you know, try and do something new or lots of things better for 66 days, and I rarely make any of them. But, you know, this has been a hell of a lot longer than 66 days. So these behavioural patterns that we've adapted to in 2020, there are going to be a certain amount of them that are going to stay. And I think that will roll over into how we're consuming media and entertainment. And even more importantly, how we want to consume media and entertainment. So some of the interesting things that came out of the panels was, for example, Leon Dykesman from Sam Media was saying, you know, they have 20% of their staff focus on data capture and analytics. And what they saw was that basically once the pandemic hit and the behavioural patterns changed so drastically that they said, if you, whatever you're doing from now, if you're using data from 2019 or 2018, it's just not going to work. There was just such a seismic shift in terms of the times of day that people are accessing, the times that they're the duration that they're accessing for. There was a much broader scope. They saw that where, for example, this demographic would be they would be searching for this type of content, due to sheer boredom and having to sit in front of the TV for so long, you know, months basically, they were literally kind of, well, what else can I look at? You know, so this opened up a whole new, both marketing, acquisition and product opportunity in that people were just so much more open to trying something else or trying something new. That, you know, you could really sort of capture and really monetize these behavioral shifts if you kind of knew what you were doing. And you guys brought up this really interesting point in one of the recent podcasts where you said if content is king, then data is going to be the ace card kind of thing, right? Now we all kind of know that. We've seen, you know, the social dilemma and all of that on Netflix in terms of there's a dark side of data and a good side of data. But I think from, you know, our industry perspective, you know, we're treading on kind of new ground here in terms of how we produce services in line with this new customer behavioral patterns. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. And the guys that really kind of, that kind of make it big in 2021, 2022 are going to be the ones that realize that now and start adapting to that right now in terms of the new services that are going to be pushed out in 2021.
Yeah, 100%. Paul, what are your views?
Totally. Yeah, totally. It's heartening that you say that the data from before 2020 is sort of in many ways irrelevant. I mean, I write
kind of levels the playing field again, doesn't it?
Well, I write a lot of analyst reports about various things, and I keep sort of having to stress this. There's no point in looking at what happened up until 2019, because 2020 was year zero. Everything started again. I think in terms of content services, you're right. People just are accessing them in completely different ways at completely different times for completely different reasons, at much higher volumes. Doing a vast variety of things now online. I mean, everybody is sort of pretty much having to do their shopping online, grocery or otherwise, for example. And while they're there, they're going to start looking at other things. I think also that plays into retailers in particular looking at how to gamify what they do to try and attract people in a different way, or to make the shopping experience sort of more entertaining. I think how games companies look at advertising third-party stuff and drive traffic, from their game sites to retailers, and the partnership deals you're going to see between those sorts of organizations is going to be huge as well. So I think, the Forbes article, as Jarvis says, it is old, because I think even since that was published in October, things have changed and moved on further still. But I think, the salient points obviously are right in there. But yes, data.
I think, we were more positive in October that we were sort of reaching the end. And I think January has taught us that we've got a bit of a way to go. So, I think all of these habits and these new behavioural patterns are going to be sort of reinforced over the couple of months, even further.
I think so. And it's quite an interesting experiment, isn't it? Because it's actually forced people to do new things for way more than 66 days. So whether they want to do all their shopping,
whether they want to
or not, they have to do it. And so, by the time this is over in 2020 million, or whenever we finally get there out, they'll all just be, that's how you do your shopping. I don't know. I mean, it's like my kids, they haven't been to a supermarket now since 2019, probably. I imagine
or a school.
Or school, pretty much, yeah. It's all right, they've got me to teach them. What could they possibly not get that they could get at school? Yeah, so I think the habits have all changed. I think the thing is they will change again and keep changing. I think post-pandemic, it will be some new world of, it won't be like it was before.
Exactly.
It won't be like it is now. It will be something else. And I think sort of trying to figure out where that's going to be and what that's going to be like is something that businesses need to start to maybe sketch out with a pencil on the back of an envelope now.
Yeah, I mean, the teleworking thing I think is a really good point, because that really plays into the times of day that people are, looking at other things other than their work, basically, and like you were saying, Paul, it kind of almost creates this need again, like we had back in the old days with mobile, where you need that snackable content because that they're just, right, I just need kind of 10 minutes off, kind of get away from that Excel doc or whatever, something entertaining, and then go back in. So it's almost kind of bringing us back to, I've always said I think there's just a constant place for short form content, especially with the new generations coming up, because they're just not used to having to have the attention span to sit down to a 40-minute presentation or a 2.5 hour movie or something like that. They want to be able to go in and get out again, kind of thing, or flip between. Yeah. So,
but I think there's this thing that other content forms are going to be driven by people not wanting to keep doing that because we're bored with work.
We're all oversaturated now.
With the news.
I
want a game. I want something totally removed from this. Even like I don't want to sit and watch Netflix.
Or a 10-minute bit of yoga. Who knows?
That's what I'm thinking, Jarvis. It's speed yoga. It's speed yoga.
It is. There are like little 10. It's fabulous. There's little 10-minute sessions where it just literally you can do it in your office or at your desk. And it refreshes the mind.
What's been missing so far is doing that with two middle-aged men. And I think,
or yoga on the speed.
Boys, you're giving me a challenge.
I just want to, on that, I mean, we've really delved deep into this, but I mean, one of the, I just want to ask you both, when I read that article, and scanned it several times. And they were talking about how the digital ecosystem has changed and how it's meant that advertising strategies have changed, and content creators have got to overcome hurdles associated with remote working to meet consumers where they are, which is obviously at the moment at home. But that obviously means that in many cases, those workers and those people consuming content are in their homes with other people. Now, when we go back to the original days of premium mobile content, it was considered to be very much a one-on-one type of product, right? And it certainly wasn't, there was talk of, the teenagers in their room staring at the screen, mum and dad staring at their screen. And there was a suggestion in that article that in fact content creators are starting to create, or there is a demand for content which is almost going back to the old days that everyone can enjoy in the family. Now I don't know if you've got that sense as well, but that sort of surprised me, because it's you would have thought that we would have been disappearing individually down the rabbit hole, one-on-one with your screen. But they were definitely talking there about content having to be mindful of the fact that it's coming into an environment where there are more people. Now, I don't know if that was to all consumed together, or where I will consume that piece of content, or that they were talking about, family videos, and they were talking about cartoons and things like that, that maybe you would then share within your house. So, Jules, in terms of, because you're the video content queen, have you seen an uptick in, sort of more universally enjoyable content, or is that not something you've noticed just yet, or did I make that up?
No, not noticed it at all. And that doesn't. I mean, were there any statistics in terms of what you saw? Oh, it was that article from Forbes. Because the reason I say it is because everything that I see is kind of, even if they're all sat in the same room, they're all on their own devices. And it's even like, my 22-year-old niece, if I go visit the UK and we'll all sit down and watch telly together, she's on a phone and kind of like slipping in and out. So whilst it's a lovely idea, I think it's a lovely idea for our generation rather than, the sort of up and coming generations in terms of feasibility. Because I think it's very rare that occasionally is a special deal, but I think it's very rare that everybody wants to sit down and watch the same thing together, right? Or is that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they mentioned the DIY content, didn't they? That was sort of specifically designed to get, dad and the kids building furniture and things like that. So, I just thought it sounded lovely, and I was a little bit utopian. I was hoping you were going to say, "Yeah, flying out the door."
No, I'm a very positive person, as you know, but I can't, and I'm not saying that I know the answer. But logically, based on kind of what we see, the type of content that people are ordering from us, no, I don't see that.
Okay. I think there is something in it though, because I think there's a lot of. Well, I think that everyone is consuming their own content, particularly across different generations, as you say, all in the same house rather than spread about as they were before. But I think it probably does also encourage that lean back content where they do get together, especially families, to you will maybe try and find a movie to watch that you can all enjoy or something like that. I know I do.
Just your sports clips.
I watch things I want to watch when I want to watch them, but sometimes it's nice to sort of come together. And I think so. It's maybe designing content that works for.
I was going to say there's an opportunity there for a good idea that actually compels. If you could create that addictiveness that something like the like button on Facebook has around something that draws the family together, then you could be on a winner.
Which something that is coming out of being locked down and basically being isolated is that people crave company and want to be with people, even if it is just virtually. And I think a lot of interactive games sort of play into that. You need to extend that. And I think a lot of these content services could be more sort of communal, like you said at the beginning, and more interactive. I think we might see more of that sort of thing, and that might encourage people to do more together on a big screen rather than individually on there.
Just as a quick summary, the Telemedia 8.1 sessions that Jules has very kindly curated and hosted for us are not to be missed. The first one, how viewer behavioural changes could increase DCB and VAS revenues, part 1, focused on acquisition. And there is a part 2, which focuses on marketing and content. And I believe there is a part 3 in the pipeline now. So go to telemedia8.1.com, sign up with your free profile. If you haven't got one, then why not get one? It takes 5 minutes, and then you can search over 1,000 subscribers and view something in the region of 60 or 70 on-demand sessions. It's growing all the time. I just wanted to say, Jules, thank you so much for being our first guest. You've been brilliant.
Thank you.
It's hard to think that we could have found somebody that would be able to keep Paul and I quiet for
so nice. So nice to listen to someone else as well.
Oh shit! I'm sure you both know already that I have a bit of a reputation of being a talker, so it was inevitable.
So
I didn't overrule it.
So on that bombshell, Jules, I'm going to see you at 8.1, and Paul, I'll see you next week. And
you will indeed.
Very much for watching. We'll look forward to seeing you in episode 15. Jules, take it easy. Go back.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Bye.